Have you ever wondered what happened to WWE wrestlers who used to be on screen every week and then suddenly stopped appearing just like that? Well, in WWE, the rules have always been strict. An old wrestler said that things were always done Vince's way, and if you tried to stand up for yourself or your teammates, you suffered the consequences. In this video, we'll look at cases ranging from the boss asking wrestlers who needed rehab for addictions to go to rehab to really controversial cases. All of them had to leave WWE for some reason. Well, I'll stop talking for now, and today I'll present to you 10 wrestlers who were fired from WWE in the worst way. 10. R-Truth. The details about R-Truth's contract expiring in 2025 were revealed in the Netflix series Incredible. With negotiations at a standstill, it was agreed in principle that Truth's contract would not be renewed. Once he announced this on social media, the reaction was huge, both from his colleagues and from the fans. R-Truth said,
"Recibí una llamada, fui despedido y puse un tweet. Nunca pensé que el mundo ardería."
When R-Truth returned to television a week later, Triple H claimed that it was all part of the show, something that R-Truth denied. On the show Incredible, Hunter explained that Truth was always under contract and that it was a communication failure that made the situation blow up. R-Truth, for his part, admitted, "I took it as if I had been fired, I was hurt." In the end, both parties ended on good terms, and R-Truth returned. But his firing was deeply disrespectful, even more so when they said it was all part of the script and that R-Truth was lying. 9. Grandmaster Sexay. Originally fired in 2001 for possession of substances at an airport, Grandmaster Sexay had a brief comeback in 2004. It was clear that the company had no plans for him beyond being a talent just to put others over, kind of like a jobber, wrestlers who lose every week to boost others. In his book, Chris Jericho revealed the reason for his brief stay. Jericho doesn't mention him by name, but he describes a wrestler who returned that year with similar characteristics and said, "One night in Pichuaca, I was in Vince's office going over a promo when the non-televised matches started. A wrestler who had had a good run years before had just been rehired. Vince, who was already in a bad mood, saw him struggle in a disastrous match and lost his mind. Why the hell is that guy in my ring? Who hired him? He's garbage and I never want to see him again." That's how Grandmaster Sexay finished his match and got fired, and since then they never hired him full-time again. 8. Kenny Smubly. Writer positions in WWE usually have a quick turnover. They often hire people with little knowledge of the product, always preferring people from television. A newly hired writer, Kenny Smubly, went on a podcast after she had already been hired and admitted she didn't know anything about wrestling. She also didn't know the names of the wrestlers. She said that the then champion Bobby Lashley was called something like Bobby Ashley. She literally said, "They didn't require me to know anything about wrestling. Should I really know that? I don't think so. I'm a good writer." This interview circulated online and she was fired immediately before officially starting to work. 7. Dave Taylor. Historically, the WWE schedule was brutal. In his book, announcer Justin Roberts details the tough travel conditions. In fact, he mentioned a tour where the crew didn't have a chance to sleep for an entire weekend. When Dave Taylor raised his concern to the office, John Laurinaitis told him that if he didn't feel safe, someone else would take his place. Dave Taylor spoke at a production meeting about how exhausting the travel was, and then he disappeared. Many say that was the company's way of teaching him a lesson. If you complain about something you don't like, you'll suffer the consequences. 6. Sasha Banks and Naomi. The documentary Incredible also highlighted the departure of Naomi and Sasha Banks in 2022. They left the arena as tag team champions, citing creative differences. The company responded on screen by saying that they left in an unprofessional manner. There were creative plans to put Naomi and Sasha against each other in a match very soon. Ultimately, the girls didn't like this, and it led them to quit. It was a truly shocking moment for two tag team champions to leave WWE in that way. The head of relations couldn't believe it. According to what was said in the documentary, they just got fed up and left. They didn't agree with what WWE had planned for them in the future. 5. Ron Simmons was a legend, but his career was ending when he was released in 2004. The company made the decision after Ron Simmons refused to go to rehab for alcoholism. In an interview, Ron Simmons revealed that an incident at the party after WrestleMania DX was the turning point for everything. Ron Simmons himself said, "I was drinking a lot and I got into trouble that night." He didn't provide more details, but you can imagine what might have happened. Fortunately, years later, Vince McMahon supported him in dealing with his problem, and Simmons was grateful and ended up coming back for a while, even though at the time he had left pretty upset with Vince McMahon. 4. The Sandman is one of the wrestlers best known for drinking both inside and outside the ring. In 2007, he was one of the few original ECW members left, but he was fed up with his position and felt that he didn't have real opportunities within WWE. On a tour in South Africa, he went out partying. Cody Rhodes said that as a rookie, he offered to buy him a drink, but the Sandman asked for 4 vodkas. He drank one and threw the glass hard at a fireplace inside the venue. All of this reached the ears of WWE executives, so when he returned to the United States, he was fired. At that time, the Sandman said that decision was actually a relief. 3. Kid Kash. After implementing the wellness policy in 2006, talent began to be fined for smoking marijuana. Kid Kash was fired for smoking before an event in Canada. He was in the parking lot with stars like Rob Van Dam, Booker T, Batista, and Randy Orton. However, out of that whole group, Kid Kash was the guinea pig. John Laurinaitis said that Vince wanted to make an example out of someone regarding the wellness policy, and he found nothing better than to do it with Kid Kash so that no one else would try to smoke that while working for the company. And Kid Kash felt that it was really unfair because, according to him, while the big stars paid fines, he was fired without a chance to defend himself. 2. René Dupré. And if we keep talking about the wellness policy that was pushed after the Chris Benoit tragedy, this was a key factor that made René Dupré quit, but you know, it wasn't the only reason. Another reason was Vince McMahon canceled his match just before he went to the ring. Dupré was ready to go out with Paul London, but the show was completely changed at the last second. René Dupré said, "At that moment I realized they didn't want me there. I'm going to Japan. I felt that WWE was no longer important." Dupré left 2 days after this incident and stayed in Japan for 17 years. 1. Hayden Reich. Hayden Reich was quite an eccentric character, and the reason he left fits his personality. It's hard to believe. At the beginning of 2006, he ended up in the hospital after crashing his car in the snow. When WWE agents Fit Finlay and Steve Gearin went to pick him up from the hospital for the next WWE show, he refused to leave. The doctors said he was fine, that he was ready to leave, but he said he didn't want to go because he liked the food there, and that was the place where he was going to stay. He had simply given up mentally, or at least that's what everyone else thought. Weeks later, he was fired by the company.